Welcome to a Legendarium special about Greek mythology. In this episode, we will talk about the tragic House of Oedipus. And in the comments section, please let me know who you think is the most heroic or least heroic character in the tragic history of the House of Oedipus. Greek myths are 2,000 years old, perhaps older, and yet they are still read and loved today. One such myth concerns the tragic House of Oedipus. As often happens in Greek mythology, the story of Oedipus starts before his birth. King Laius of Thebes consulted the oracle at Delphi to learn if he and his wife would have any children. To his horror, he learned that his son would one day murder him and then marry his mother. Laius tried thwarting the prophecy by staying away from his wife's bed, but a night of revels and sweet wine thwart him. Queen Jocasta becomes pregnant and gives birth to a baby boy in the fullness of time. In a second attempt to thwart prophecy, Laius told his slaves to pierce the baby's ankles so that he could not crawl, let alone cause harm. Later, King Laius gave his son to a shepherd, telling him to leave the baby in the mountains to die. The shepherd, unable to do such a cruel thing, instead brought him to the childless King Polybus and Queen Merope of Corinth. The royal couple adopted the baby and raised him as their own, thus thwarting King Laius's attempt to defy prophecy. They named the boy after his ankle wounds, and Oedipus means swollen foot. When Oedipus grew up, he learned from a drunkard that Polybus and Merope adopted him. Deciding to investigate, Oedipus traveled to the oracle of Delphi, hoping to learn the truth. Instead of getting the answer he came for, Oedipus learned that he would murder his father and marry his mother. And upon learning this, Oedipus, much like his father Laius, chose to leave Corinth in an attempt to defy prophecy. Of course, Oedipus's attempt to avert prophecy fails because he unwittingly fled to his natural parents, not from them. Perhaps the highest hubris, at least in Greek thinking, is believing that one can cheat the gods. Oedipus winds up crossing paths with his real father Laius at a narrow crossroad. After a brief argument with Laius's charioteer over who had the right to go first, Oedipus murdered both men, but a single slave escaped the carnage. And after traveling to Thebes, Oedipus found the city plagued by the man-eating Sphinx. The creature put a riddle to all passers-by and, of course, murdered those who could not answer the riddle, which is quite reasonable of her. The Sphinx asked, "What has 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs at twilight?" Oedipus solved the riddle, saying, "It is man, for man crawls on all 4s as a baby, walks on 2 legs as a man, and walks with a cane in old age." The Sphinx, unable to bear defeat, killed herself. At the time, Thebes had an interim ruler named Creon, the brother of the widowed Jocasta and Oedipus's uncle. Before Oedipus's arrival, Creon decreed that anyone who killed the Sphinx would be gifted the hand of Queen Jocasta and the throne of Thebes. In this way, Oedipus fulfilled the second half of the prophecy, and he had 4 children with his biological mother named Eteocles, Polynices, Antigone, and Ismene. To the ancient Greeks, fate would be far too powerful to be overridden by human choices, and thinking otherwise is at best rank hubris and at worst foolishness. Years later, a plague strikes Thebes. Oedipus, determined to save his city, sent Creon to the oracle at Delphi. Creon returns with the news that the gods punish Thebes for failing to bring the killer of King Laius to justice. Oedipus swore to find him and punish him, not knowing that the killer is in fact himself. It becomes clear that he does not remember that chance encounter at the crossroads very well. Could his memory of his younger years have faded, or does he not want to remember? Nonetheless, he speaks with the prophet Tiresias, who, though blind, sees more than any other. After long questioning, Tiresias finally blames Oedipus, but Oedipus refused to believe that he could murder his father, who, as far as he knows, still rules back home. Queen Jocasta then comforts King Oedipus and tells him about the events which led to the death of her first husband, and they sound strikingly similar to Oedipus's encounter with the unknown charioteer years ago. Shaken, Oedipus sends for the slave who survived the murders. But before the slave is brought to him, a messenger tells him that Polybus of Corinth died. Still believing that Polybus is his real father, Oedipus declines to attend the funeral to avoid meeting his mother. The messenger, however, informs Oedipus that he doesn't need to worry about betting his mother, for Polybus and Merope are not his natural parents. Queen Jocasta, now convinced that the prophecy has come true, hangs herself in her bedchamber. Yet Oedipus is still unconvinced and waits for the slave's testimony, only to realize that he had, in fact, murdered his father years ago at the crossroads. Oedipus tries to find Jocasta, and after finding her dangling corpse, tears 2 golden pins from her gown and gouges out his own eyes. As he promised to do with the killer of Laius, Oedipus banishes himself from the city, guided by his daughter's sister Antigone. In time, Oedipus settled in a grove outside Athens, but all is not well back in Thebes, where Oedipus's younger son Eteocles and his uncle Creon overthrow the elder son Polynices. Until then, Creon appeared to be a loyal man, uninterested in power, but he will soon show himself to be a cruel and cunning powermonger. Polynices raises troops in Argos to retake the throne. Both sons want their father's support, but the embittered old man refuses to support either. Seeking peace during his final days, Oedipus enters Athens at the invitation of King Theseus. Soon after, Polynices arrives and tells his father that Eteocles bribed the men of Thebes to turn against him. Oedipus, unmoved, curses both his sons and predicts that they will die at each other's hands. As the chorus notes, Greek tragedy is like a flood. Once started, it cannot be stopped. Aware that he will get nothing from his father, Polynices asks his sisters Ismene and Antigone to give him a proper burial should he die in the upcoming battle. And in a strange final event, Oedipus simply disappears, as if swallowed by the earth, and the war, as Oedipus predicted, results in both brothers dying on the battlefield. Creon now rules Thebes alone, and he orders that Polynices, who brought a foreign army into the city, not be allowed burial rites. This would have been a shockingly cruel punishment to the Greeks. Instead of traveling to the underworld, Polynices' condemned spirit would wander the earth forever. This is Creon extending his power into the gods' realm, a horrid blasphemy. Creon further threatens to murder anyone who tries to bury Polynices, and even stations sentries over his body. Antigone, despite Creon's edict and her sister Ismene refusing to help, buries her brother and gives him proper funeral rites. Throughout the myth, Antigone shows courage and moral clarity that most of her cursed family lacks. Keenly aware of how the gods have condemned her family, she knows that she has nothing to lose. When the sentries fall asleep, they wake up to find that someone has buried Polynices. After being captured, Antigone confesses to Creon and says that it is Creon who defies the gods by refusing Polynices' burial. Creon condemns both Antigone and Ismene to death. Haemon, Creon's son and Antigone's fiancé, declares his opposition to Creon's petty vindictiveness. An enraged Creon threatens to slay Antigone before his son's eyes and curses him. And to the ancient Greeks, a curse is a very serious thing. Perhaps for that reason, the blind prophet Tiresias arrives and advises Creon to allow Polynices to be buried. This finally persuades Creon to be reasonable, but it is too late. His son Haemon entered Antigone's tomb, found her dead, and then committed suicide. Creon's wife Eurydice, blaming her husband's tyranny for the death of her son, then commits suicide as well, leaving Creon grief-stricken and overwhelmed with remorse. The chorus then notes that all who had to die have now died. Only the guards are left, and the tragedy does not matter to them, but the House of Oedipus is no more. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.